For years now we've been discussing how do we look at the access issues in relation to Montserrat. Today we want to look principally at the sea access and the additional approvals which have been provided, and the reasoning for that. We're now looking at moving at a larger vessel, a more functional vessel in relation to being able to cover the distance more comfortably in a shorter period of time. But as with every approval, there are conditions. We clearly have to look at developing a marketing and promotional strategy as we look at one of the things which have continuously been saying, the double destination or the multi-destination tourism elements with Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, and also to include Guadeloupe. And it's rather interesting to note that American Airlines has today announced that they're doing direct flights into Guadeloupe as well. The other one is that we have to look at being more effective and efficient in terms of bookings and handling of passengers. Given the APD that Antigua has introduced, and I use APD euphemistically in that it links back with the APD in the UK that we've made a lot of noise about, is that we have to be in a position to show to the authorities in Antigua that a passenger who is booked from London to Antigua, because they can't do bookings directly into Montserrat, do actually have through connections to Montserrat. And as a consequence, we now have to look at online bookings and online ticket sales for the ferry service and for the flight services coming into Montserrat. That's critically important. We also have to review, rationalize, and improve the way we do business in relation to the agencies that operate the ferry. So we will now be looking at retendering with new terms of reference for the ferry operators, that is the ground handlers, both in Montserrat and Antigua. And one niggling point with Antigua is that the ferry terminal at Heritage Quay, or Bryson Spay as I like to call it, that we must ensure that that facility becomes operational almost immediately. The building is already there, I think there's electricity, but I think there's just a need for the telephone service to that facility. So those are the general terms and conditions for the sea access. We've had a project at Lookout for the Lookout School improvement. The funding time frame has lapsed because of some issues, including legal issues from contractors, questioning the procurement process, and the court has made a ruling. We have finally gotten the approval of DFID to repackage the project to include the equipment for both buildings, which was not included in the original project. Put in place a different management system for the project so that we can deliver proper facilities at the grade school within the new time frame as established. The project implementation unit is managing that project on behalf of government, but we're also putting in place other management systems to be able to focus on delivering that and other projects on time and within cost. So those are the two projects which I just wanted to provide an update on, and I'll ask Dr. Kimbugwe to say a few words if he so wishes before we open for questions.
Okay, thank you, Premier. I think you've covered most of the issues that we were most interested in, particularly the debate about ongoing access arrangements and the suitability of the ferry, and critically in how we can help jumpstart not only the tourism sector but the entire economy in Montserrat. One thing that people must note is that the intervention on access is just a short-term intervention which is building into the longer-term decision on either the purchase of the ferry or entering into a public-private sector arrangement on purpose-built ferry for Montserrat. The reason I say that it's a short-term issue is that, you know, at the same time as we've done this approval, we are going ahead as part of the SGP to do all the work required to get to that decision point on the long-term ferry. But also it's critical that the short-term ferry demonstrates both to, you know, the government of Montserrat here, but also to the UK government, that the investment in the long-term ferry is one that will be sustainable, because you use the short-term arrangement with an improved ferry service to build up the demand, as well as to open up the routes, test those routes and see, you know, the suitability of those various services. So we think that this is just a stepping stone to the more long-term solution to Montserrat's access issues. The conditions the Premier has outlined are very, very important, because we think that not only just simply making an additional investment in improving access to Montserrat is just the start, but we need to improve how we facilitate, but also how we market that service. And facilitation requires using the technology that's available. Online booking is critical, and how we use that service to facilitate people. I think those of you who remember in December, when during the 50th festival, hundreds of Montserratians came back, or should I say thousands, because it actually was thousands who came back. You know, there were long queues in Antigua, particularly in trying to process them. We have to address that, and this is where we think we can use technology to do it. Those of you who have seen the Montserrat online visa system understand how that technology has worked, and everybody thinks that that is an ideal platform that we can copy, essentially, when we're building out an access website that will provide those types of services, working with various partners within government. On the Lookout School, I think we are glad that this intervention has happened, particularly given that we had reached a point where you know, the DFID decision was either we end this project or until we could find a solution. And I'm glad that, you know, working together with the government of Montserrat, we've come to some sort of an understanding. They've gone away, they've produced a proposal which looks at revamping, not only refurbishing the old school, and looks at providing additional fixtures and fittings within the new buildings that are going to be built, as well as completing Building 6, which was the outstanding building. So we think the proposals that was sent to us was an ideal proposal that we thought, okay, we'll provide some additional funding so that we can get this project finished. We need to remember that the reason we're doing all this is because of the young people in Montserrat, and to make sure that those services are available to them in the first instance on the first week of the semester in September of 2013. That's when phase one of this phase will be complete, and then the second one will be at the end of 2014. So within the next 7-8 months, the refurbishment should be finished, and then the Building 6 should be completed a year later. Sacha, do you want to add anything on education?
Just to say, I think this is wonderful news for Montserrat. It gives young people the opportunity to access new services, particularly around the new IT classroom, library, sports hall, and changing rooms. So I think it's wonderful news for Montserrat. It's good that it'll be ready for the next academic year, and I think DFID is obviously showing continued support to Montserrat in that area.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you three. Nice to have you, Ms. Chennell. And I think I can get your name better than he will did. Sacha. It's your first name. Welcome. I think it's the first time you've done this in a press conference. And I don't think we've ever had the Premier and Doctor together in a press conference, actually. First. I think this is a first as well, to have both of them together. Or maybe they have been brief occasions. Anyhow. Just right towards the end, I usually like to start at the end. I missed a little bit on the secondary school, the school
Lookout.
Also at the Lookout. We were talking about just Lookout. Okay, okay, wonderful. So we're looking ahead at school. They have gone away and come back. Who's the they who have gone away and come back with the plans? Government of Montserrat?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the contractors. And Premier, on that, what were the procurement problems, and how did the matter enter the court? Give us a little.
Well, there were at least two contractors who both claimed that they should have had the contract awarded. The matter went before the judge. The judge has made a ruling. on at least one appeal before the High Court and the Court of Appeal here, and that's as much as I can say.
Sorry, you said so the judge made a ruling and there was one appeal on that? There's an appeal on that? Or?
No, the appeal went before the appeal court, I think, last week, and the appeal court made a ruling.
You can't tell us what that ruling is?
I have not had written detail of the ruling.
Okay. But it's enough for us to go forward?
Well, we will go forward. Part of it is that we can't then hold up the development of a country simply because we have locals who are questioning whether or not they should have had a contract. And those are matters which we're seeking to resolve in order for us to go forward.
There have been questions about this whole procurement, tendering, and there have been problems. I know that letters have been written to head office on the issue. And I know
basically what is happening here is interpretation and application of the rules. We're in an increasingly litigious society, and therefore we're asking all officers in government who have anything to do with government procurement to look at the rules, read them thoroughly, and apply them as provided for by law. There are no shortcuts.
Are you satisfied that from your end, from government's end, that they're handling the matters properly?
We have a procurement board, and of course we're dealing with people. From time to time things can go wrong. Always simply saying to them, you must be a lot more judicious and be careful when you're scrutinizing applications, tender applications, the review process and the award process. There are no shortcuts. Follow the law as stipulated and the regulations as provided with those laws.
Coming out of this, somehow I got a call just this morning that I had to tell him I was coming to a press conference and what was going to be discussed. It turns out that was part of it. Where the question to me was, do you know if they had put out tenders for some activity that's going on down in Little Bay?
No, in the case of Little Bay, that is a direct labor. It's not a tendered process, direct labor. It is being managed by the MDC. And rather than tendering them out as individual units, they're hiring workers to do the work under the supervision of the MDC.
I see. So it's like I need a laborer to do this. I need a contract. I suppose no contract.
In effect, MDC is a contractor.
MDC is the contractor. Yes. Does that though? I mean, is that in keeping though with the procurement thing?
Well, one of the things which I'll say, Bennett, is that whereas we say to persons in government, follow the rules, we're also saying to people, the rules and regulations are published, also look at them, read them, and if there is an issue, then question it on the basis of the regulations that are provided, not in terms of what you believe should be or should not be.
Except that I just read, I mean, again, I suppose when you get into the details of it, one would see the difference, but if you permit me, nevertheless, MDC, and this is about the relationship to government and statutory bodies and government-owned companies. Nevertheless, the MDC remains a government-owned company subject to Government of Montserrat statutory body rules and regulations as it is in respect of public funding. Okay,
so let me put it in a little more simple detail. Public Works has a building to knock down. Public Works can go out there and use its own resources and equipment to knock it down because they have the ability to do it in-house. So they're their own contractors. They may hire in labor, and therefore their procedures for hiring in labor, which is separate and distinct from contract work.
I can see coming out of this that perhaps people really need to not just want to read the things, but to have them come with their questions after.
No, it's similar. For example, if you're building a house, you can go several routes. One, you can be your own contractor and hire in labor, or you can go out and contract a contractor to do the work, which means that you have to follow contract law. in this particular case, MDC has opted for their own efficiencies to be their own contractor. They're supervising the works using their staff, and therefore they're now saying to people, if you're seeking employment, this is the process which you need to follow to seek employment as a tradesman, or as a laborer, or as a construction worker, or supplier of materials.
Anybody else on that particular topic?
Let me just go on. Good afternoon. I just want to back up a little bit to the Lookout school project. And the Premier mentioned a little earlier that certain items weren't in the original contract document, and they will be included in this one. So I would like to know the reason why they're not in the first document. What are those equipment that you mentioned, or whatever it is that weren't included in the original document?
Classroom and lab equipment.
And why were they not included initially?
Human error, somebody could have made an omission. Simple as that. You see, part of, and you're opening another discussion here. When I say to the public, if civil servants want a pay increase, they have to be productive. Now, when you make a mistake like this, then what happens? Then we say it's okay. So the net effect is, if you wish to show that government of Montserrat is moving forward, we're asking for people to be a little more judicious in terms of how they do things, and that's simple. So error was made, we've gone back to DFID, they have provided additional funding, and we're moving forward.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Just to add to the Premier's point, I think also from DFID's perspective, it gave an opportunity to review the whole project. So obviously when Government of Montserrat came through with a new proposal, it also enabled us to look at sort of how well it was in terms of value for money, and to look at the whole project. And as a result, we're able to commit more funds to it.
The only reason, the background from which I'm asking this question, is that there must have been someone or some ones who would have had oversight of this document while it's in process. That was the reason why I asked that question.
No, so what I'm basically saying, something went wrong, it is now being corrected. We're not trying here to identify who should blame, but the fact that it has been corrected.
So Premier, we are not laying any blames here. I'm just for clarity. That's the reason why I asked the question.
I'm simply
so
saying
let's move on,
that
Mr. Premier.
We have identified it as something which was left out, and we have corrected it.
What is the time frame for the start of the new Lookout, well, Building 6, as you quite rightly mentioned?
Essentially what should happen is they should be launching a tender. If they want to hit the September 2013 deadline, they should be launching tenders later this week. The plan was originally to launch them at the beginning of this week, but then trying to get all the documentation approved within government has taken some time, which has then meant that it will only happen towards the end of this week. So that's the target, to get phase 1 of the works, which involves the refurbishment of the existing site, creating access between the existing site and the new site, and then a little bit more work that could be done without the kids being in school at the time when the school breaks. And then once the kids are in school, there'll be fencing around to make sure that they then start construction of Building 6. So it can only be done once the area has been fenced off properly.
I want to put a plug in for the Ministry of Education, because when the initial works were being done at the school, there was a lot of dust.
Yes.
That was the dust was interfering with the nursery school and the preschool there. So what will be done, I know you said a fence, but that in itself would not, control the dust.
I think ultimately, because PIU will be implementing this, they'll be following certain building codes requirements in Montserrat. So, we can't stipulate in the document itself that they must build a fence of this height or whatever. All we've said is that they must make sure that the site is safe and that it must be built in accordance to the building codes and regulations in Montserrat.
Interesting about the situation, because I have a concern, because it's personal. I don't go there in terms of how PIU handles their neighbors when they're doing their work. On the ferry, we will be getting a bigger, faster, and more comfortable ferry. That's not the purpose-built ferry we're talking about.
No, you're looking at an interim situation. You build the market. If you're looking at a purpose-built ferry, you might be looking at 2 years before you can acquire such a facility. And what we've determined is that let us, in the meantime, lease something more suitable, build the market, so that the private sector working with government, when we go for the purpose-built ferry, will at least have some base numbers to work with, and at least a base route to be able to even develop further.
Yeah, I see.
Can I just add to that as well? And the other aspect that you have to remember is that when you make that intervention, the idea is to reduce long-term access subsidies. What you don't want is to launch that brand new ferry and then you have to build up the market while you're doing it, which is very costly. Remember, when you're subsidizing a smaller vessel, it's not as much as subsidizing a much larger vessel where you're looking at dead legs where only 5 or 10 people are on board when you have the 350 seats on board. So the idea is, in the interim, build up that market, build up the day tour market from Antigua, from Guadeloupe, from Nevis, and then also at the same time, make sure that you're putting in place systems and facilities that will facilitate the new ferry once it comes in. So, you're able to get running as quickly as possible with the new vessel.
Yeah, I talked with you too much, because you answered my next question. I was going to be expressing concern about us, yes, and us being prepared to take the new numbers and facilitate it.
But that's why you see one of the first conditions is develop a marketing strategy. Yeah.
Before we actually go to this.
Yeah, before you launch there's a longer term solution. Develop a marketing strategy, make sure that's in place, that's supportive of this interim arrangement. Because it is critical when we go to seek ministerial decision for the long term ferry, we need to have data to support that decision. We need to be able to say that we've now managed to increase the capacity on each trip to about this number. And these are the benefits to the economy in Montserrat. So imagine what the benefits would be if we have a longer term solution. Everything we do has to be justified in a business case. And in that business case, we must provide data to support those decisions or the recommendations we're making to ministers.
Okay, just so that we don't say that this is just talk and in 6 months, because this is to be done within this financial year.
Yeah.
I thought I saw that somewhere. That is, yes, within this financial year. So we're talking about right through to March next year,
yes,
which will include, obviously, our festival period, or remaining festivals that we have. What time frame, though, do you think that we could get ready to facilitate the increase? Because my first concern is 5 days a week. When we begin this, are we going to be in a position to bring more than the dead legs that you talked about in terms of coming to Montserrat?
Okay, but you see, that's what we factored in. The increase in the subsidy is factoring the idea that we're going to be moving to a 5-day service, which then means at the beginning you will have a problem with the numbers. So you have to be able to justify that, and that's hence the additional funding. Then when you get to the more busier periods of the year, you'll be expending less of the subsidy, yeah, than you are in the in the periods between, I would say, now and really realistically around beginning of October. That's when the market picks up again. Yeah. So that's why you're getting that additional funding.
No, but additionally, remember part of what the market which was being developed is the follow-up cruise market from Antigua, where the bigger cruise ships come into Antigua. Passengers will come across to Montserrat, and there's an arrangement already in place for those passengers coming across to Montserrat. One of the reasons why we had to get out of that market is that from the cruise line standpoint, they couldn't sell that product because the ferry was not adequate. And therefore, what we're now looking at is providing that adequate ferry so that we can at least be bringing larger numbers. One of the principal markets, your cruise ship market, coming out of Antigua.
Will for that service, it cannot be, it would hardly be on a scheduled service. Will this ferry, when we get to it, will this be able to, let's say, these people want to come across from maybe say 10 o'clock and not 8 o'clock when we have...
Well, part of it is that the timing will be worked out on the basis of the schedule which the cruise ships, which conform to the cruise ship schedule.
Yeah.
So if it's 10 o'clock and go back for 4 o'clock or go back for 5 o'clock, then that would be the schedule for the days when the cruise ships operate. When the service started, we were looking at moving 100 persons per turnaround coming off the cruise ships.
Yes, 3 questions or possibly 4. The release that states that the access subsidy will be increased does not indicate, or at least I haven't found it, what's the quantum of this increase? What is the total access subsidy?
Okay, the reason why we haven't put a figure is purely because we'll be going through a tendering process, so we don't want to advertise how much money is available.
Well,
otherwise you will not have a competitive tender.
You all indicated the investment here for the Lookout School and at the grade school, as the premier said.
Yeah.
It says £2.475 million. So if that's the case, you've already released the amount of information available. Why would the same obtain here?
Yeah, I can respond to that. The figure you have of £2.57 million is the totality of the Lookout School project, much of which has already been built. What we haven't released is the additional funding we've put in, so that people are not aware of what that number is, so that they can tender effectively on Building 6 plus the additional works. That's why you see we've only given you the totality of the project without giving you what Building 6 and the other components are going to be.
Yes. Related to that, it was my understanding that the original Building 6 was funded by EU, I was mistaken? Was by EU
The entire project has been funded by DFID,
it has
not by
been
the EU.
Funded by EU. Okay. There was mention made, I think, by you that the PIU was going to be making sure that the building code was being adhered to. Is the building code in fact law in Montserrat? I know it's been drafted for a number of years. Is it in fact law?
The building code is the building code adopted for Montserrat, and that is the code which has been applied for years in Montserrat.
But
so there's a question as to whether or not the code has to be made into law, and that is not necessary that it has to be applied to law, because you're basically dealing with a code which any building in Montserrat goes up on the basis of that code, and that's the code which is used by the PDA. There's still some additional work which is being done with the regional people in terms of enhancing the code, and once we have adopted that, then we will then go the route of law.
And lastly, concerning the procurement process, the aid memoir for the last budgetary discussions indicated that government had limited technical expertise, resulting in misinterpretation of existing regulations, as evidenced by delays to Lookout School and the A01 road upgrade. That government agreed that an across-the-board review of the procurement regulations and guidelines, accompanied by staff training, is a priority. What progress has been made in that regard?
Staff training is actually in process, and some staff training has actually taken place already, but training is a continuous process. What was the first one?
I can respond to the first one, because What we've done, once we identified that in the aid memoir, and also it's one of the areas that we've identified for the short-term TC, we are in the process, and that's my infrastructure advisor here on island, of drafting terms of reference to make sure that we bring in a consultant who will help review all the documentation, review the contracting process, and also provide the relevant training that's required for government officials, both on the procurement board as well as the internal procurement agencies within various government departments.
Yes, one last question, considering procurement and the MDC, I'm sorry, I believe in the procurement regulations, there's something to the effect that entities, public entities, cannot circumvent the rules by doing things as what it seems that MDC might be doing in order to avoid tendering. So I'm just wondering if this is one of the, I mean, typically if $100,000 is the benchmark, they will make sure that the tenders come in at $99,000, so they don't have to go to the Central Tenders Board, etc. And also by being your own contractor in order to avoid the regulations. I'm simply asking because it seems, what is the value of these works overall, that the MDC is its own contractor?
You see, that is one of the reasons why we're saying we need to look at the regulations assiduously, because when you look at elements of it without looking at it in its totality, then one will have a misinterpretation. And therefore, at this particular point, I'm not going to get into a discussion whether or not MDC has followed the rules, yes or no.
Well, they're circumventing them.
If they are, in fact, in breach, then it's a matter which will be dealt with by the appropriate authority.
Thank you.
Except Premier, you said the appropriate authority, don't we not appropriate authority in
it's
the court?
His ministry.
Or you'll deal with it in the
No, you see, sometimes we love to identify politicians and you identify individuals. There is a process. There's an authority, there's an appeals process.
Right.
And if you don't read the regulations and understand what they say, then you'll have this kind of rubbish question.
No.
No, the point I'm getting at here
Stop that right now.
The point I'm getting at here is very simple. There is a process, there are procedures. If there's a question in relation to procedures, then follow the process and appeal to who it should be appealed to. It's not me you appeal to. I have absolutely nothing to do with the procurement process.
Well, I don't know where you took that personal premium, because what I asked, all I was asking was what authority, whether it's the court, but I think you, in part of what you just said, you said that there are processes and that there is the authority within the procurement situation, so that answered the thing. And I really cannot do without commenting on the fact that you refer to questions as rubbish questions.
Can I just have
I don't
one
think
comment?
there's absolutely any rubbish question at any time, really.
In fact, this is just for your information, Bennett. In the procurement regulations, it states that the what's that? The complaints commission that does not exist is the body to which one would complain to.
Thanks.
And just as a correction on that, there is in fact an appointed complaints commission who have actually started doing their work.